Hey everybody, I wanted to come on and do a tutorial on how to do pigment pressing using MAC pigments. I'm sure you can use other brands, but I don't know how well they press. I've heard that things like Barry M doesn't press so well because they're too fine, but this is just going to be for MAC pigments. So what you're going to need to press your pigment, you're going to need a pigment. I'm using Soft Wash Grey, which is a really pretty grey-blue frosty colour. You're going to need something to put it in, so I'm using an empty pan, a metal pan that'll fit into a MAC palette. I'm going to use Surgical Spirit. I've heard of rubbing alcohol, which is the same thing, works well too. For my method, you need a paper clip, which will bend out later. You'll need something to actually press it with, so a bit of fabric. Denim from jeans works really well, but this is an old sock, which I think is just as good and it's clean, but this'll press it and it'll give you the shape of the hedge marks. You'll need newspaper just to make sure you don't spill pigment everywhere, because it can get quite messy, or I can get quite messy, and a hairdryer. I've got my little travel hairdryer with me now. So I'll reset the camera so it's down in front of me and I'll show you what to do, okay? Right, so you've set your newspaper out to make sure that you don't make a mess everywhere. You don't have to use newspaper if you trust yourself. I don't trust myself. And what you're going to do, you're going to bend out your paper clip so it looks like it's in an S shape. Like so. I don't know if you can actually see it. Like that. Right, the camera. There we go. Right, I've also brought a spoon along. I don't know why I'm waving the things, because the bottle of rubbing alcohol or Surgical Spirit, I don't want to pour too much, so I'm going to use a spoon to make sure I put it in bit by bit. So we're going to open up the pigment and make sure that we're on a flat piece of the newspaper. This is a bit bent, and I'm going to use the smaller side of the paper clip and use it as a little spoon. And I'm going to scoop out the pigment and pop it into the empty pan. We're just going to cover it quite evenly and tap that off. And now we're going to take the Surgical Spirit, and I'm just using my spoon. I'm just going to pour a little bit on, because this way I can be more precise. And I'm just going to pour this onto, there we go, so it's a bit more flat. Pour this onto the pigment, and it'll look strange. It'll look like it's bubbling or something. That's fine. Oh, Christ's sake, I'm making a mess already. So we're just going to pour it in bit by bit, and it'll bubble some more, and I can pour off the excess. I'm going to go back to the paper clip, and using the smaller side again, we're just going to mix it in together, and it's going to form a paste. I'll tell you what, I'll move it away from this bit of spilled alcohol. That's another good reason for newspaper, I'm telling you. Do use the newspaper, and we're just going to mix it into a paste. Now it's going to look quite flat. It's going to be quite little, so you're just going to have to top it up each time. Do the same thing. Use the paper clip and tap on some more pigment, and then spoon in a little bit more of the Surgical Spirit and mix it. Right, so I repeated that same step a few more times just to make sure. I repeated that step a few more times just to make sure that I had enough of the solution, because when you add the liquid, it bubbles down. It's as if it minimises, so you're only going to have as much mixture as you put in liquid, because it doesn't really grow. So I've done that a few times, and then I tried to smooth it out using the paper clip so it's quite flat. And now we're going to use the hairdryer, and we're just going to blast it with the hairdryer until it's, I'd say, sort of 80-85% dry. We don't want it to be completely bone dry, because it won't be very packed like we want it to be, but we're just going to dry it as much as possible without going too far. Okay, so I'll turn the camera off while I dry so that I don't deafen you all. Right, now that it's dry, I'm going to take the fabric that you've got. So I'm using this sock, this black sock, and a coin. I've got a 10p piece here, which is the perfect size. It's a little bit smaller. I think in America, is it a dime or a quarter? I don't know what the difference is, but one of them fits perfectly. So get a coin about the size of the pan that you're going to press. I've popped it inside the sock, and now we're just going to press. It would be great if you had a clamp, you know, the kind that you put on the side of your desk, and you could put, you know, a full clamp's worth of pressure on it. I had a flower press which I actually broke by pressing this, so be careful if you use anything that's quite thin wood. But you know, if you've got a clamp, that would be ideal. If not, it's just going to take a bit longer, a bit more pressing, a bit more effort on your half. Okay, so we're just going to place the coin over and press, and you can press for as long or as short as you want. You could just press for a second just to smoothen it down, if you weren't that bothered about really packing it in. If you just want to be able to use it in a palette, a couple of seconds press would be adequate. If you want it to be more solidly packed, press it for longer. Makes sense. So I'm just pressing this really hard. I'm usually quite tempted to have a look halfway and see how it looks, but if you keep it in one place for as long as possible, you're more likely to get the hatch marks. Okay, so you should probably press it for longer, as long as you can, within reason. Don't take 2 days pressing it. And when you peel away your sock, you'll have a little bit on. There's a little bit on the bottom there, but that's just because the coin didn't really fill the sides. And there you go, there's your pressed pigment. So it's solid, it's flat. Where's the camera? It's solid, it's flat, it's got edge marks on. It's a bit lower than it could be. You could fill it up a bit higher, but since it's just for me, and the consistency is perfect as ever. So it's got the exact same colour. I'll swatch it next to straight from the jar. They're much easier to use. I'm actually going to press my MAC solar bits from the Neo Sci-Fi, I think, collection, or whatever that summer collection was, because they were really piecey. And swatch here. There you go. So you can see that which one's which. That is the pressed pigment. That is the loose pigment. The loose pigment actually goes on thinner, so you'd have to use more, or use a mixing medium. It's the same as using a mixing medium, but it's much easier to travel and to store pressed pigments, you know, on a palette or something, than the loose pigments. So I can now put that in a palette and take it with us on holiday or anywhere, and I know in myself I'm much more likely to actually use pressed pigments than I am to use loose pigments, because I'll pull a palette out of blues or greens or whatever I'm using, and I'll just forget about the pigments. So there you go. I've seen people try to press, I'm just rubbing out the swatches with the same thing. I've seen people try to press matte pigments and have a lot of trouble. I know, I think primary yellow or chrome yellow pigment doesn't press very well. Matte things just don't work so well, and I think really chunky things like helium pigment from MAC is a bit difficult to work with, but it's always worth a try. If it doesn't work, put it back in the jar and nothing lost. Okay, so I think the colour payoff's the colour's the exact same in the pressed pigment, but they're probably easier to work with, and easier to blend. You get more colour payoff. So I'll show you back to me. Right, so I really hope you enjoyed that tutorial and it has helped you. I'm just editing the end to add. The smell of the surgical spirit, the alcohol smell, will be quite strong for a while. So once you've pressed your pigment, leave them out in the air for as long as possible to let the alcohol smell evaporate. Because if you put them straight into a palette and seal it, the smell will stay there for much longer, and it may transfer into the colours. So leave it, get fresh air into it for as long as possible. So I'm going to put mine by the window. Don't put it right underneath your face unless you want to get drunk off the smell of rubbing alcohol. Leave it for as long as possible to let the smell evaporate, and so it won't harm you further, okay?